While the rest of Europe is battling stagnation, deindustrialization, and political chaos, one country is quietly plotting a takeover. It's a nation that has grown continuously for 30 years and is set to become the new economic engine of the West. I'm of course talking about Poland. And that's why today we're going to dive into the Polish economic miracle, explain the massive military fortress they are building, and see whether Warsaw is really about to replace Berlin as the capital of Europe. My name is Nick, and you're watching Coin Bureau Finance. First up, we need to make one thing absolutely clear. Nothing in this video is financial advice. This is purely educational content designed to give you a deep dive into Poland. And if you want more content like this, then make sure you're subscribed, drop a like, and flick that notification bell as well so you don't miss the next one. Now, to understand why Poland is winning, we need to understand who is losing. Germany, once the industrial powerhouse, is deindustrializing. France is paralyzed by debt and political gridlock. The UK, let's just say it's seen better days. The old narrative was that these Western giants were the engine of the continent and that the East was just a factory floor. But oddly enough, while the West has been stagnating, Poland has been pulling off something that economists are calling a golden age. Between 1990 and 2020, the only major economy in the world to grow faster than Poland was China, and that is a staggering statistic. So while the Eurozone was tipping over debt crises and recessions, Poland just kept growing. In fact, it was the only EU country to avoid a recession during the 2008 financial crisis entirely. And this growth hasn't slowed down either. As of 2025, Poland has officially crossed the threshold of $1 trillion GDP economy. Now, to put that into perspective, it is now the 20th largest economy in the world. Perhaps even more symbolically, this is the year that Poland is projected to overtake Spain in GDP per capita adjusted for purchasing power. And that means the average Pole is now effectively wealthier than the average Spaniard. And this is significant because it shatters the old stereotypes. For decades, the image of Poland in the West was one of grey post-Soviet blocks, cheap labor, and bad roads. And if you visited in the 90s, that might have been true. But today, it's a different world. We are talking about a Warsaw skyline that now rivals that of the city of London, and massive infrastructure projects designed to crown Poland as the logistics hub of Europe. So, just like South Korea transitioned from a war-torn emerging market to a high-tech advanced economy in a single generation, Poland is doing the same. Now, you might be wondering, Nick, but if Poland is in the EU, why hasn't it crashed like the rest of them? Well, the answer lies in a few strategic decisions that, at the time, seemed controversial. The first was keeping their own currency, the zloty. While Southern Europe trapped itself in the Eurozone straitjacket, unable to print money or devalue their way out of a crisis, Poland kept its hand on the lever. This allowed Warsaw to control its own interest rates and manage inflation on its own terms. In 2008 and again in 2020, the zloty acted as a shock absorber for the economy, weakening just enough to keep exports competitive while the rest of Europe was paralyzed. But a sovereign currency is useless without a workforce to back it up. And this brings us to the second ingredient: sheer hunger. While Western Europe has embraced the 4-day work week and quiet quitting, Poland is putting in the hours. The average Polish worker clocks in around 39 hours a week, significantly more than their counterparts in Germany, France, or the UK. And nowhere is this shift more visible than in the relationship between Poland and the United Kingdom. For 20 years, the flow of people was one way: young Poles moving to Britain to work in construction, hospitality, and healthcare. But since Brexit and the UK's subsequent economic unraveling, the tide has turned. In 2017, there were over 1 million Poles living in the UK. By 2025, that number had dropped to around 700,000. In the last year alone, more than 3 times as many Poles left the UK than arrived. And we're not just talking about laborers returning home. We're talking doctors, engineers, architects taking their skills and capital and global experience back to Warsaw. Why? Because the math has changed. When you factor in the cost of living, rent, and safety, the quality of life in Poland is arguably higher. Warsaw is clean, modern, and virtually crime-free, a stark contrast of the rising instability in major Western capitals. On top of that, in 2019, the Polish government introduced a zero income tax for workers under the age of 26. Sure, there is an annual limit on the relief, but the math still speaks for itself. Think about it. If you're a 24-year-old software developer, why pay 40% tax in London to live in a shoebox when you can pay 0% tax to live in Warsaw? Well, the data says many wouldn't. And before we move on, if you want to take more control of your financial future, one simple step is staying informed. And you can do that by signing up for our free weekly newsletter. And while you're over there, you can also check out our finance-related deals we've put together exclusively for the viewers of this channel. All you need to do is hit the link in the description or scan this QR code. It's completely free and the deals include exclusive bonuses, discounts, and promotions. Back to the video. However, a strong economy is worthless if you can't defend it. And this brings us to the most visible sign of Poland's ambition. While the rest of NATO has spent the last decade debating whether they can afford to spend 2% of GDP on defense, Poland has decided to smash the piggy bank. As of 2026, Poland is spending 4.7% of its GDP on defense. That is double the previous NATO target and, by percentage, higher than even the United States. The goal is simple: to build the largest land army in Europe. We're talking about a target of 300,000 troops, effectively turning the country into a fortress that can hold the eastern flank single-handedly. And they aren't just buying off the shelf, they are building an industrial complex, because when Germany hesitated to send tanks to Ukraine in the early days of the war, Warsaw took notes. They realized they couldn't rely on Western Europe supply chains that might get bogged down in politics, so they looked east to South Korea. Poland plans to acquire 1,000 K2 Black Panther tanks, hundreds of K9 howitzers, and 48 Fa-50 fighter jets. On top of that, a huge chunk of these tanks will eventually be manufactured in Poland. But tanks only solve one part of the security equation. The other part, the one that crippled Germany, is energy. For 20 years, Berlin bet the house on cheap Russian gas, shutting down its nuclear plants and effectively handing Moscow a kill switch for the German economy. Poland, oddly enough, saw the trap coming. Years before the invasion of Ukraine, Warsaw began constructing the Baltic Pipe, a strategic artery connecting Poland directly to Norwegian gas fields. So when Russia turned off the taps in 2022, Germany scrambled. Poland just shrugged, and now they are doubling down. The Polish government is pushing ahead with a large nuclear energy program, with plans for 6 reactors and the first units scheduled to break ground shortly. The strategy here is crystal clear. Poland doesn't just want to be energy independent, it wants to be an energy hub for the region. And by securing non-Russian gas and building a nuclear baseload, Warsaw is effectively immunizing itself against the kind of energy blackmail that is currently deindustrializing Germany. But if Poland wants to win the 21st century, it needs to solve the single biggest threat facing every emerging economy: the middle-income trap. For those unfamiliar, the middle-income trap is effectively the worst of both worlds. It happens when countries become too expensive to compete on cheap labor, like Vietnam or India, but isn't innovative enough to compete with rich nations like the US or Switzerland. You get stuck in the middle, functioning as a permanent subcontractor for wealthier neighbors. And for a long time, this was Poland's destiny, to be the assembly line for German car manufacturers. But Poland is effectively trying to break out of this cage. They don't want just made in Poland, they want designed in Poland. And the weapon of choice is the digital sector. While the rest of Europe drowns in regulations and red tape that stifles innovation, Poland has quietly built a tech valley. The Polish information and communication technology market has exploded to over $30 billion in value. But what's fascinating is the type of tech that they are building. Take the video game industry, for example. Now, it might sound niche, but it is a massive cultural export. Poland has over 400 game development companies, including giants like the studio behind The Witcher and Cyberpunk 2077. This isn't just kids coding in basements. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange. And much of this is thanks to the Polish education system. Now, Poland currently produces around 37,500 engineers every single year. That is the second highest number in the European Union, trailing only Germany. But while German engineering talent is often tied up in legacy industries like combustion engines, or industries that are slowly dying, Polish talent is overwhelmingly focused on the new economy. And this is why giants like Google, Microsoft, and Visa have opened massive research and development hubs in the country. And they aren't just coming to Warsaw because it's cheap. I mean, if they wanted cheap, they could just go to Manila or Bangalore. They are coming to Warsaw because the talent is world-class and hungry. And that isn't even counting the tens of thousands of highly skilled professionals who fled to Poland at the start of the war. This shift from cost-effective labor to high-value innovation is the only way to escape the middle-income trap. So, let's recap. Poland has the fastest growing economy, the largest army, and robust demand for its labor. Naturally, this has led to a massive shift in political confidence. For 30 years, the political center of gravity in Europe was Berlin. Today, it is drifting steadily towards Warsaw. And you can see this in how Poland is organizing its own neighborhood. Instead of waiting for Germany to lead, Poland has become the de facto leader of the 3 Seas Initiative, a bloc of 12 nations sandwiched between the Baltic, Adriatic, and Black Seas. And this isn't just a trade club. It's a geopolitical counterweight to the old Franco-German axis. The Baltics, the Czechs, and the Slovaks are increasingly looking to Warsaw for leadership on security and infrastructure. And this ambition extends all the way to the top table. Poland is no longer content with just being a member of the EU. It is effectively campaigning for a seat at the G20. The argument is simple. If the EU is stagnating and the old powers are fading, the G20 needs a voice that represents the growth engine of Europe. And this isn't just wishful thinking. There are strong rumors and even public endorsements from the US administration that Poland is on the shortlist for a permanent seat, or at least a permanent guest status, similar to Spain. Speaking of the US, this is perhaps Poland's greatest geopolitical asset, with Warsaw positioning itself as the America of Europe. With the Trump-advanced administration back in the White House, this loyalty is paying dividends. The US sees Poland not just as an ally, but as a model ally, a nation that spends close to 5% of its GDP on defense, defends its borders, and doesn't nag about strategic autonomy. In the eyes of Washington, Berlin is a problem, but Warsaw is the solution, and this special relationship gives Poland a level of diplomatic cover that infuriates Brussels but makes it untouchable. However, Poland is also playing a pragmatic game with the other superpower, China. Despite being a staunch NATO ally, the Polish leadership has actively pitched itself as Beijing's, quote, gateway to Europe. The logic is purely economic. If Chinese electric vehicles and batteries are going to enter the European market, Warsaw wants them entering through Polish ports and rolling on Polish rails. It's a dangerous tightrope to walk, but so far they haven't fallen off. Ultimately, Poland's vision for Europe is fundamentally different from that of Brussels. They don't want a United States of Europe run by bureaucrats. They want a Europe of nations, a loose confederation of sovereign states focused on trade and security. And for the first time in history, they have the economic and military weight to actually force that conversation. However, before we start printing Superpower 2030 t-shirts, we need to take a sober look at the balance sheet. Because for all talk of a miracle, there are large structural cracks forming in the foundation. And if Warsaw isn't careful, the whole thing could come crashing down. The first crack is the debt. Remember that golden age growth we talked about? Well, a significant chunk of that is being fueled by a credit card binge. In 2025, Poland was running a budget deficit of roughly 6.8% of GDP. Now that is massive, and in fact, it is currently one of the highest deficits in the entire European Union. Brussels has already placed Poland under the, quote, excessive deficit procedure, which is EU speak for stop spending money you don't have. But the government is in a bind. They have to spend that money to buy the tanks, build the airports, and subsidize the energy transition. They are effectively betting the house that the future growth will pay for today's debts. But if that growth stalls, the debt to GDP ratio, which is racing towards 70%, could become a noose. And what could cause that growth to stall? Well, that brings us to the second crack. Germany. Despite all the talk of a decoupling, the harsh reality is that the Polish economy is still deeply addicted to German supply chains. Germany is Poland's largest trading partner by a country mile. If the German economy sneezes, Poland catches a cold. And right now, Germany isn't just sneezing, it has pneumonia. The German economy is forecast to grow barely 1% this year after years of stagnation. If German factories continue to close, the orders for Polish subcontractors will dry up. But the third crack is the deadliest of them all. It's not money, it's people. Poland is sitting on a demographic time bomb. The fertility rate has collapsed to a record low of 1.1 children per woman. That is one of the lowest rates among the world's most advanced economies, lower than Italy and even lower than Japan. And even with the great return of Poles from the UK, the math simply doesn't add up. The UN projects that Poland's population could shrink by over 4 million people by 2050. We're talking about a future where there are fewer workers to pay for the pensions of a rapidly aging society. It is the exact same trap that is slowly strangling Germany and Italy right now. If Poland cannot reverse this trend, either through a baby boom or more immigration, the miracle will eventually run out of steam, simply because there won't be anyone left to work in the factories. So the race is on. Poland needs to become rich enough and automated enough to support an aging population before the demographics collapse. It is a high-stakes gamble against time. But what does all of this mean for the future of Europe? Ultimately, Poland is the ultimate test for the continent. If you are an optimist, you see a South Korea of Europe, a nation that rose from the ashes and will eventually replace the tired old powers of the West. If you are a pessimist, you see a country running on a sugar high of debt, about to slam into a demographic brick wall that no amount of tanks or skyscrapers can fix. But here's the bottom line. Poland is the only country in Europe that is actually trying. While Germany deindustrializes and France debates its own decline, Poland just keeps on building. They are playing a high-stakes game of catch-up, and for the first time in modern history, they are actually winning. Will Warsaw replace Berlin as the capital of Europe by 2030? Probably not. The demographic headwinds are stiff, and, ironically enough, the economic link to Germany is a heavy anchor. But the fact that we are even asking this question tells you everything you need to know about how much the world has changed. Now, we want to hear from you. Is the Polish miracle sustainable, or is the demographic cliff too steep to climb? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want a deeper look at the reasons that Europe is falling behind, then you can watch our full breakdown right over here. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again before too long. This is Nick, signing off.